Prepare, respond, survive. When seconds count, train with the best. Fire Facilities, custom steel towers built for real-world fire training. Be ready, be resilient.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good evening. This will be on at night. It's normally on at night, around 7:30 Eastern Time. Welcome to the Backstep, everyone. My name is Ronnie K. That's Tommy A. up on the top with that gorgeous-looking beard, man. Look at that's coming in nice for an old guy like you. That looks pretty good, Tommy. What's happening out west, man?
It used to be a different color. I don't know what happened. So things have kind of slacked off a little bit. We got a little bit of rain. The weather's starting to cool down a little bit. And I'm hoping that at least within the state, we're kind of seeing the end of wildland fire season. Things have been hopping here in San Juan County. It's been a violent summer, for a rural area that we're in. We've been hitting at least one or two shootings every month. And, the guys have been doing good to keep up with the EMS end of things. And here we are.
Our last show or two shows ago, we had on one of the guys that was in Roswell, New Mexico when Chief Lou Jones was murdered years ago. Him and a paramedic were killed going to a fire. They got to the front door. Guy opened the door, burned up with a rifle, and killed both of them. So we had him on because we were talking about violence in the fire. It was right after the two chiefs in Utah got killed. So we've kind of touched that from time to time. It's and it doesn't seem it's getting any better. The cops are doing the best they can, but these lone wolf things going on around. Like what happened last week out at the college with that guy, Mr. Kirk, and all that. So not really sure how and when it ends, but. Tonight's show, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about command decision-making and things that go with it. We've got two very distinguished guests on tonight. Tommy, why don't you introduce Chief Rubin, and I'll introduce Chief Currao. Go ahead, Tom.
It is once again my pleasure. I've had to introduce Dennis a couple times, and we don't have enough time to go through the complete resume of everywhere he's been a fire chief, but Dennis is now the permanent fire chief for the Kansas City, Kansas Fire Department. And depending on which bio you look at or dates on the internet, his experience spans anywhere from 35 to 45 years. He's held positions in many levels: line firefighter, EMT, company officer, staff officer, command officer, and chief of department. Most notably, chief of the Washington, D.C. Fire Department for 4 years, fire chief in Atlanta, Georgia, and smaller municipalities in Wisconsin and Virginia. Dennis has got a master's degree in organizational leadership, a bachelor's in fire administration, an associate in fire science management, graduate of the National Fire Academy EFO program, and also a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School of Executive Leadership and Homeland Security. Dennis has authored hundreds of articles and worked on books such as Rube's Rules for Survival, DC Fire, It's Always About the Leadership, and the latest, Choosing to Command, which we'll hopefully get some questions in on that, and certainly your efforts to revive crew resource management in the fire service. Notable challenges I found somewhere. I didn't believe you had any challenges, Chief Rubin. But just being the chief in D.C. in that environment, I'm sure was a big one that you have taken care of. Dennis, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Backstep.
What an honor and pleasure to be on the Backstep with the Backstep Boys. I almost wanted to call you the Backstreet Boys, but I'll save the jokes for later. But what an honor and pleasure. Certainly, both of you are luminaries in this business. And I could go on and on about your background as well, but being asked is just magnificent. Thank you for this great opportunity.
Great. Glad to have you here. It's my pleasure to introduce Assistant Chief Tom Currao, who started his career a very short 41 years ago. Goes quick, right, Chief? He was a member of the New City Volunteer Fire Department in Rockland County, New York. He's been a member of the FDNY for 32 years and currently is the Chief of Fire Prevention. I report directly to Chief Currao and have the honor and pleasure to work with him every single day. Previously, he was Chief of Training for FDNY, responsible for the Fire Academy and the EMS Academy. And then he was Chief of Counterterrorism and Emergency Preparedness, working close collaboration with the Homeland Security professionals at the Center for Terrorism. In this capacity, Chief Currao led a team of analysts developing intelligence products for the first responder community and briefing senior FDNY officials at both classified and unclassified levels. Beyond his career as a firefighter in the South Bronx, assigned to Ladder 19, in his 32 years, he served as a fire marshal, lieutenant, captain, company commander, battalion chief, deputy chief, working in all 5 boroughs of New York City. Tom Currao is a graduate of John Jay College, Yippee, with a bachelor's of science in fire science and a master of arts in security studies, also from the Center of Homeland Defense and Security at the Naval Postgraduate School. So you guys, it sounds like you're alumni. You're kind of fellow alumni together. Tom, welcome to the Backstep with Tommy and I, of course, and Chief Rubin, and we're so glad to have you here today.
Ron, thanks so much. It's an absolute pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tom, and Chief Rubin. I'm always humbled by the amount of fire service knowledge that is out there and what I can still learn. And this is actually the first time doing a podcast, so I'm very, very excited. Thanks so much.
Wait, so we got a 4-star chief who's a probie? This is crazy.
Very much so.
That's right. 4-star chief. I don't know how that happens. And if I'm not mistaken, Tom, you're also still involved with the volunteer fire department in your town, correct? Where you live?
I am. I still serve.
Okay, yes. Great. Thank you.
Yes.
So I think we're going to kick it off with a general question. I'm going to ask Chief Currao, Tom Currao, to kind of kick it off. So, what are the biggest challenges in fireground decision making? And when you hear that term, fireground decision making, what does that mean as an incident commander? So, what are the challenges, and what is it deep down? What does it kind of bring up to the surface for you?
So when I think of fireground decision making, I think of a very iterative process. It's a constant cognitive process, analytical assessment. I know we teach our youngest firefighters this, but it applies, I think, at any rank. It really starts at the receipt of the alarm. And that's when you begin processing that information. Even if you're not initially assigned, especially, maybe as a deputy chief or staff chief, you're already starting to process, what's coming across, right? What do I know about these buildings already? What's a known? What's the occupancy? What's the construction, if you know that? And it is real-time information, right? What else is going on at the time? What can reports, conditions, action, needs am I hearing? Or even worse, sometimes, what am I not hearing, right? What's kind of perking that up a little bit? But I'd also like to say that I think you prepare yourself for that day for being able to make command decisions, fireground decision-making long before. I think it starts all the way through from your first beginnings in the fire service. I think it's having a learning mindset because you're constantly building on that information resource, kind of like for us old timers, that Rolodex type of thing in your head, right? What can you link back to, right? That says, I've seen this before, and then apply unique situations. So I think for me, that's a starting point as to what I think fireground decision-making is. And then as you roll into the scene, you're still gathering that intelligence. What are you hearing from your units? What are you seeing? Again, what are you not hearing that you would expect to be hearing? And using your own, I know we all have different structures to kind of organize our brain or our decision making. So
So just a quick follow-up. So what's the biggest challenge for you as a boss in the street to making those decisions? Is it from what I heard, is it what you're not hearing from the troops? Is that like the biggest challenge? You're not getting enough information? Is that what I heard?
I think so. Particularly as like a command or a staff chief, you're coming behind. So you can almost tell, not all the time, but like things are either going in a positive direction. And it's on different levels, right? So it's like, do they have access to the fire? Are they fine in the fire? Access to the building. Are they able to, set up appropriately? Are they transmitting that they're having, water issues, right? But it's also things that you are expecting to hear from the on-scene commanders that are coming before you. It's an expanding fire situation. Am I hearing that they're setting up sectors in a command channel? Do I hear the incident command system being structured out? Are they, depending on what they're saying, am I hearing them call for additional resources and transmitting that next alarm? Two things that I think are too easy to bypass, and I personally hone on them when I get in. One is communications, definitely making sure the communication structure is set up. And two is firefighter and unit accountability. A lot of times things are moving so quick. And at first company officer chief is assigning resources. And the first thing I do is when I get there is, where is everybody? Do we have a sense of where everybody is? Because it's too easy to gloss past that. But if we get a Mayday situation, we're already behind the 8 ball.
Right. Chief Rubin, follow up?
Yes, sir. I'm going to take just a little approach. First of all, everything the chief said, rubber stamp, absolutely accurate, on time, and so important. If you go back to some of the basic decision-making information, it really breaks down into two separate categories. One's called naturalistic. Naturalistic says I pull up to a situation, no matter what it is, and I know exactly step A, step B, step C is going to resolve it. For instance, hopping in your car, to make a real simple example. The other one is called classical decision-making. That's where we get out the calculator, we realize how much it's going to cost, what's the downstream, and I could go on. Most of what I'm sharing comes out of both the executive leadership program. So Chief went to a different course, a much harder course than I did at Naval Postgrad, as well as the National Fire Academy. The difference between the two ends up being discretionary time. If you were to go to a fire and say, you know what, doggone, we're going to do the classical method. Tom Aurnhammer, give me some idea exactly how many BTUs are needed. How high is this building? Give me the floor plan. If I asked him to do about a 10 or 15 minute assignment, by the time he got back with that data for me to begin implementing a situation result, if you will, a solution rather, the building would have burned down. And it's the same for the classical. If you make a classical decision to place a fire station that costs $28 million, and you know that station's got to last for 100 years, and you put it on the wrong side of the railroad tracks, and to leave the other side of the street is a bridge that you can't cross, well, you probably just wasted $28 million. I hope that makes sense. Well, as time goes on, we learned about recognition, prime decision-making, I recognize. And Chief kind of hit on that and did a good job at that. And that's pretty much a slide in the slide tray. If you go back to Persian Gulf I, the commander of the time was Colin Powell, perhaps the greatest war fighter in my personal lifetime. I love the man. I'm so sad that he's gone. I follow his books very carefully. And what he did was to make sure that every opportunity of providing an advantage relative to decision making and putting out that war, handling that war, was handled. Well, one of the things they did was to put together a book with a guy by the name of Dr. Klein. What is a high profile event that the outcome really has great matter, life and death, and it's got to be done immediately. And of course, they came up with a fire service. 30 fireground commanders were taken under the wing, and they had a researcher with them for a month. I can tell you, Jimmy Smith, rest his soul, great friend, deputy in Philadelphia. I cannot remember the chief in New York City, but there certainly was one of them. And when they pulled all this data together, that's when it became a little bit clearer. So they'd ask Chief Smith, how did you know to get that 2.5 in the back of that building at the right time to save the person on the roof. And the comments were always, I've seen it, I've done it, I've trained on it, I've understood it through training process. So that's recognition, prime decision making. I don't want to continue to clamor on, but I got to tell you, you're in my wheelhouse. I love the notion. I'll just close out the opening comments for me by saying we don't do a very good job in passing on the information that is necessary to be able to be your first day in a chief's buggy and have all that collection of skills necessary to do this job right. When I look at all the tactical training I've had, volumes and volumes of it, and in fact, from both Tom and Ron, I can't tell you the numbers of classes I sat through to learn from you guys, and it's been amazing. But the reality of it is, when you talk about decision making, there's a pretty big void.
Dennis, I just really wanted to hit real quickly on your new book, Choosing the Command, and its references to crew resource management, which, I'm thinking back to 1999 when Gary Brees, who I consider to be the godfather of crew resource management.
No, not even close. Not even close. And I love the man.
Stole all that stuff from the aviation industry and started applying it to the fire service. I am a huge fan of RPDM, and RPDM is one of the tools in the crew resource management toolbox that are out there. And Dennis, you can probably tell me whether I'm incorrect or not, but I think when Klein started his study, he was contracted to the military, and they were trying to figure out how the old generals who were all retiring out were able to make decisions in the midst of battle. And it was because they had done that. And
you have the story just a little backwards. It was done by the Department of Defense. It was funded and supported by Colin Powell, the commanding general of our forces. However, they used fire service leaders. And when Colin Powell looked around, again, he was in Vietnam twice, and I'm passionate about what we're talking about. He was there as a butter bar lieutenant and survived, which was almost impossible. Then he came back as an advisor, as a captain. When he had 4 stars on his collar, and we're getting ready to go into the Persian Gulf, he looks around and he realizes some of the actual hard-pressing experience that we have in our entire military was what he describes in his book as a drive-by. Grenada, a war that lasted for 100 hours, would be one of the examples. There just wasn't that capability of the living, breathing generals, both retired and active, that had wartime. Remember, the last war was in Vietnam, about 25 years prior to that. And if my calculation is wrong, probably a general officer starts at 50 or 60 years old. So in other words, for the most part, they were gone. And that's when the decision was made to go to the fire service. 30 fire departments. I know Seattle was one. It was all big places that do a lot of work. And they actually stayed for 30 days that Smith worked, which I guess took 3 months. And they collected data. And Dr. Gary Klein assembled that into the final book that describes it as the slide tray. Crew resource management. And I love Gary Brees. He pulled us together with some nice meetings. There were 12 people in Washington, but by no means would he be able to claim, and I don't think he would. If you go back to 1978, and if some point in time you hold up like one finger to say, Rube, wrap it up, I'm going to wrap it up if you get my point. In 1978, we have an airplane crash. It's United 173. At the helm that day is Captain Melvern McBroom, and as they're flying from, from Denver, Colorado into Oregon. It'll come to me in a minute. Portland, Oregon. They have a problem with the nose gear. It happens to be a DC-8. My belief is probably no one in this picture has flown on a DC-8. It's a very old plane. Again, it's December 29th of 1978. And the problem is the landing gear light doesn't come on. It goes from green to yellow to red, or red, yellow to green. Red means they're up, yellow means they're in transition, and green means it's down and you can land. Well, out of the 3 lights, only two of the lights light up. The nose gear does not give affirmative guarantee that it's locked. So he does what's called an out and back. He goes about 45 minutes out and then tries to come back. And along the way, seven times, the first officer, and in that particular plane, there's a second officer, navigator, and they tell him seven times, Captain, you're running out of fuel. He never hears them. They even get into an argument just before they crash over the fact that you don't have fuel, buddy, the engines, that's his nickname. Buddy, the engines are flaming out. He's like, what are you talking about? So from that day, after that plane crash, 10 will die, 23 were critically injured. The FAA said, until there's a decision-making model that manages the front of an aircraft where the pilot, first officer, second officer can have input, we're going to ground you on 180. So, of course, before January 1st of 1980, 2 years later, in a couple of weeks, they had that in place. And it started off as cockpit resource management. And then it transitioned to crew resource management. But it is the most effective tool to make a positive decision that you're ever going to run across.
That was a pretty cool history lesson, don't you think, Tom? That's why we have you guys on. You know, it's lovely. Tommy A, did you want to kick the next question to the bosses?
I wanted to point out, and Tom, I gotta give you credit for giving me a flashback of using the 13-point size up, and the acronym COAL was wealth. I had forgotten all about that one, and I'm sure somewhere back in the late 70s I wrote it down somewhere. But would you mind just doing a quick explanation of how that fits into your command?
Yeah, I've always liked coal was wealth. It seems to be, and obviously, the construction, occupancy, area life, water supply, auxiliary appliances, your standpipe, your sprinklers, and the street conditions is the was, and then the wealth is weather and exposures, your apparatus, location of the fire, what time of day it is, which we know is significantly impactful, and then what are the hazards. So it's something that, I remember from recruit school, and I've continually applied throughout my career as a company officer and as a chief officer. I like it. It's simple for me, but it to me, it's comprehensive. And if I think in those lines, it helps me to manage my thinking, particularly when I pull up to a situation that's rapidly escalating. It's one of those things that, there's just way too much fire than the units have on scene. I have to prioritize. I don't have everybody to do what I want. And it starts to help me. And then later on, as a deputy and a staff chief, what am I thinking about as I'm rolling into the scene? And I look at that role as I'm supporting the initial incident commander. I try not to take over unless I really have to. I'm supporting their job. And one of my former great mentors and chief of department, Eddie Kilduff, said when you are at the deputy chief or staff chief rank, the first chiefs on scene take care of everything in front of the command board. You take care of everything behind the command board. And that always kind of stuck in my mind. So it works well for me. So
cool. Chief Rubin, I had the pleasure of hanging out with you a couple of times while we were in our nation's capital. And we had discussed some of the tools available to the DC fire folks. What was your particular favorite in making sure that you're not forgetting anything when you're setting up your command structure?
Chief, I would tell you two things that were implemented there, implemented in Atlanta, and we've got it accomplished here. First of all, rely, and I'm asking everybody that watches us, rely on checklists, not going off the top of your head. And when you're ready to learn more about it, please, and I get nothing out of this, please buy a book called Checklist Manifesto. And I apologize, I cannot tell you how to pronounce the last name of the doc who put it together. It has nothing to do with firefighting. He's a neurosurgeon that's brilliant, and he goes through all the details about developing checklists to make sure that mortality and morbidity is extended when they're doing operations. Brilliant man, brilliant book, absolute must read. If I had the authority, every fire person in America would, from brand new firefighter on, and it really opens up so much doors. But again, that's Checklist Manifesto. And if you don't want to buy it, I will. If you buy it and you don't like it, send it to me and I'll pay for it. And if you really are cheap, I'll get you one sent out of Amazon. $13 or $14, best money ever spent. The second element, and again, I know I'm a little different, but that'll never change, is having a command team. The minimum players in our system here in DC and in Atlanta is a minimum of a 4-person team. Of course, you got an incident commander. I put the safety officer in that same group, so that makes 2. Accountability officer. If someone says that they can account for persons, and I know a lot about New York City's a tremendous accountability program because I serve on the board of the company SDI. That's my disclaimer for today. They do brilliant, but a technician manages that, which is incredible. It's the gold standard. New York has got it exactly right. And then finally, I say bring in that deputy incident commander. Remember my crew resource management background. When I was in Atlanta, I had the tremendous pleasure of truly, honestly, high impact crash of every single model of plane that Delta owns. And if you're tracking with me, and I'm still here, you're saying, what? Well, I went in their simulator from a 132 all the way up to a 777, and they let me crash each and every one of those in a simulator. And I got to tell you, they jar your teeth. The simulators are pretty amazing. So the idea of a commander and a deputy incident commander, one doesn't overrule the other. And Chief said it so perfectly, the higher ranking chiefs in none of those systems take over. If they do, there's got to be a request by the lower person, or they have to document how that lower ranking person, in our case, it's a battalion chief running the show here and an assistant chief back up. And the assistant chief plays that assistant role to give the people experience. One day, those assistant chiefs are going to retire. Of course, they're waiting for me to go. And I believe that retirement is for quitters. But that was funny. The whole idea, though, is to build that bench strength. So between those 4 persons, and as it gets expansive, if I have to have a Bravo division, or if I have to have a roof division, expand it, bring more people into the game, if you will, have it supervised by chiefs if you can. But when we put a person in IDLH environment, there will be 4 officers that have direct responsibility to make sure that it's a round trip ticket, that they go in and they come out. Accountability has got to be separate. Safety. And, when I first get to places, they're safety officers, but they typically are not as clear as they could be on their job responsibilities. We clean that up as best we can. And the last place a safety officer ought to be is at the command post, unless it's brief visits, because they become the incident commander's eyes and ears, every place the incident commander can't see. And then finally, at a 10-minute mark, the safety officer has a very simple form. Sorry, I didn't bring one. That goes over the things that should have happened within those 10 minutes. And as the safety officer, when there's radio time available, ask the IC or deputy, checks them off. And let's just say there's 11 or 12 items and 3 are not checked off. That's the grocery list. The next things we got to do is to get those 3. And the story, I can ramble for hours. The story I love to tell is the first time I got to be completely in command. I would tell you the year, but after 30 years service, you stop trying to count because people can figure out just how doggone old you are. But I felt like I did an incredible job. I'd been a battalion chief for 8 years in training, got loose and ran the best battalion in the system. Life was good. And when the boss showed up, when the shift commander got there, I had laid supply lines. We'd advanced attack lines. We had ventilation, controlled utilities, brought in the air and light unit to start filling cylinders, a partridge in a pear tree. And Paul Shorter looked at me and he said, "Do you have an all clear?" I couldn't believe it. Finally got my opportunity and I completely blew it. And to his credit, he let me solve it. I had units in staging, sent in a ladder and a heavy rescue. They got primary, first, and second. Life was good, but he could have taken command. He could have embarrassed me. He could have gotten on the radio. He could have told a higher boss. And, this was at least 40 years ago. And quite frankly, I remember it like it was yesterday. So having that team approach, I'd love to tell you that one guy and one person is never allowed to operate an airplane. Let me just close this part of it by saying there's one single central pilot in charge. No question. Legal authority, moral authority, final responsibility. But everybody on that airplane that plays a role, like, believe it or not, the flight attendants nowadays, as well as the first officer, as well as air traffic controller, all give really good input that the pilot has an opportunity to absorb and understand, and then makes the best decision. And if you get a chance to watch over again the Miracle on the Hudson, because I'm assuming everybody watched it, the first thing Tom Hanks does is grab for his emergency response guidebook, and they go in, what's a water landing going to be like in New York City, the greatest city in the world. And as they go in there, again, he starts reading off what you got to do for a water landing. We have to take more responsibility to blend those things into our business.
Well said, Dennis. Chief Currao, you anything to follow up with that? Would you like to follow up on anything?
Yeah, I think Dennis is. I love the mention of the Miracle on the Hudson, because and watching that movie and hearing that audio. And I wrote down actually that Checklist Manifesto book. I'm going to get that. But is that mental checklist and how decisive he is, because I think they tried to redirect the plane at Teterboro, and no, it's too far, or whatever. And that's the kind of thing that it's like reasoned, informed, experienced, but it's a quick succession of a checklist. But it's organized and say, okay, boom, we're going to make that decision. And we're going to do the water landing. And I equate that to, what our commanders do every single day, right? Where they make that decision, like, no, we're going to begin to transition to exterior operations, seeing collapse signs, things like that. So I think that's, thank you for that. I think it's a great analogy.
Tom, if correct me if I'm wrong, and when we have large fires in the city, from what I've seen and observed, the chiefs on the scene kind of get together and they huddle, and they're making that, they're working as a team. It's like what Dennis talked about. They're doing that team thing also, correct?
100%. Yeah. What you don't think you can solve by yourself, when you get, and particularly, I love that, the safety chief is, so valuable. I think our special operations chiefs, because they're usually folks that are, very experienced and highly trained. They are definitely a value added. And it's like a best example of sort of, I just lost my lights here, but it's a sort of like, I don't want to say group think, but it's collaborative problem solving. And, I think one of the big things, I think qualities of a good incident commander, to be honest with you, is humility. And be able to listen, because a lot of times or sometimes, somebody's got a better strategy, and you have to be able to be open to that.
I learned the teams thing in Phoenix. I went in the late 90s. I went to couple of command schools. You waving everybody? You trying to put your lights back on? What are you doing over there?
I'm trying to put my lights back on, but they must have forgot to pay the bill
again.
There you go.
City, what do you expect? So I went to a couple of I used to call them Brunacini's command follies, right? Our good friend Alan, and they talked about team command, there. And I brought it back to my job, and I sat down with my officers, and we implemented it, and it worked great. It worked great because it was that old three heads are better than one. I mean, it worked. It was, and many times. This is when I was a chief in the chemical plant. I'd be coming in from home, and the guys are already on site, and they're working and they're doing stuff, and I'm listening. And the first time I got there, when we just started this team thing, as I walked up to the command car, my three officers, I was like Moses parting the water. Like they all got out of the way and said, "Okay, Chief, here's yours." And I said, No. Go back to doing what you're doing. You're doing fine. I'll stand 2 feet behind you and just keep doing what you're doing. And then I know Brunacini used to call it like a senior advisor. That was the position. Right? Mm-hmm. He considered himself the senior advisor to the command team. Aurnhammer, is that one of your 15 Absolutely. Phones ringing?
Fire department, how can we help you?
15 phones, that guy, and 10 scanners. So I learned that 30 years ago. 30 years ago, and it worked well. It worked well for me. It really did.
Very much.
I had to be a chance to be in Phoenix right after you're describing. Of course, that was Southwest Grocery and the Brett Tarver failure. when he died, really changed everything that Phoenix did. The chief would send 5 command officers, each had a driver, and 2 safety officers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at District 2 that day. Wolf, what's his first name? At any rate, Chief Wolf said, we have a house fire in Glendale, which I know is quite a distance away. And he said to me, do you want to go? I said, okay. He said, we're 5th due, Chief.
Wow.
5th due. Okay.
Just exactly as you described. They had a command, and then they had they go north, south, east, and west. Division north, south, or actually sector at the time. So they had those 5 positions filled, and then they had 2 safety officers. So they brought in 5, 10, 12 command officers. The drivers were captains. I think they still are waiting to make chief. Chief Brunacini, there's nobody ever going to be able to compete with the work that he did. So if you're waiting to make battalion, you will be a captain in a battalion buggy. And when the chief's off, you'll move over, but you'll get all that tremendous advice that you wouldn't otherwise get riding the front seat of a fire.
Yeah, to me, that was a genius move that he had. The chief's aide was a captain on the battalion chief's list waiting to go. And he rode with that chief for about a year. And then he made chief, and he already knew the drill. I mean, what a great program that he set up over there. But I had a chat with him at FDIC one year, and he said to me, he says, I know you're from New York. He says, but we had a fire in a really old building recently, a 5-alarm fire. I said, how old? He said, 65. I said, 1865? He said, no, 1965. That's an old building in Phoenix, he said. But he said to me, he said, it went to 5 alarms. He says, I came in from home, and I had a bus. They had a command bus. He said, I walked in. Everybody was doing exactly what they were supposed to do. They all looked at me. He says, I reached into my bag. I carry a little bag with me, and I gave out Snicker bars. Everybody got a Snickers bar. He says, and I sat down and I just watched them do what they do. He said, and I just, instilling that confidence in those other guys to make those decisions and all that stuff. It was, yep. All right, I got a new question. Let's talk about stress on the fireground. My good friend Tommy Dunn is a retired deputy chief out of the Bronx. Tom, I don't know if you came, but you worked in the Bronx a lot. Tom Dunn was in the 7th Division. He lives up here near me in Chappaqua, so we see each other. We have coffee now, and he does a class on incident commander stress. All the things that are stressing you up. So the question for the 2 chiefs is, how do you manage that? How do you deal with it? And how do you manage to get it to the side when you got to make those tough decisions, maybe when things are going really, really bad? So I'll ask Tom Currao to start us off with that.
Sure. I think there's a positive and negative side to that, right? So I think that stress that where you are focused, you're sort of on your game, you're thinking, you're making decisions, it's like a healthy elevation of maybe the adrenaline, but you got your game face on. I think that is the positive side. That's using stress in maybe a productive way. I think where it becomes, it can be very very at a great disadvantage is it when it takes over your decision making. When you get that, that sort of auditory exclusion, where you're not, you're overly focused. You're not taking the bigger picture, particularly as coming in as a chief, and you are you're not prioritizing your decision making. You seem to be almost kind of like a bit of the panic is setting in type of thing, right? And it can happen to all of us. We are all human in our emotions, but I think the counterbalance to that is training exercise. I think we don't do enough of that in stressing ourselves during those times where we have a chance to really practice and play. how many times do we train or exercise where we have a challenging fire situation, but we don't have all the resources that we need, right? I mean, I've been to exercises where the command bus is already on the scene, like, okay, well, that would never happen. I think we really need to think, I think exercise design and building training programs is both an art and a science. And I think people that are really good at it can intertwine in there. They're, really building those skills of assessment and analysis and decision making under stress.
So I guess my quick follow up, and then I'm going to ask Chief Rubin to jump in. But my quick follow up is, how do you manage that stress? You get out of the car, you're at a fourth alarm. Things are kind of going to hell a little bit, and everybody senior to me as I was growing up in the business said, everybody gets 5 seconds for holy shit. Everybody gets a 5 seconds. Oh shit. Mm-hmm. And then you got to collect yourself and go to work, so to speak. So how do you manage that? I mean, how is it manageable?
So I think it actually starts way ahead of time with, like you said, always been in a learning mindset and thinking about it. And even when you go to those buildings on routine calls, or, you're just thinking about it, like, what would I do here? That, like, the what if type of scenario. I think I've always preached dress for success. It sounds very simple, but when I prepared to get ready to whatever it was, battalion deputy, I had a routine that I went in, and that went down to making sure I had whatever it was, clipboard, digital device, pencils, whatever I needed. Was I dressed for the weather? If you show up and you're not ready to go in your particular role, and you're thinking about how cold you are, right off the bat, you're at a disadvantage, right? And I tell people, I say, remember, you're going to be the last person probably to leave that scene, right? As they're taking up the hose, especially as a staff chief, there's probably nobody coming behind you. So you have to be ready for the long haul. The other thing is to not get sucked in right away. As you're coming in, go around the exposure tree side. Take a look from a different vantage point. Don't just go running right up right away. Listening to the communications that are going on. Take in all that input that help your decision making. And then I think prioritization. I had a very challenging fire one night. It was a row of stores. I actually thought they had it because I wasn't hearing too much chatter, which worried me a little bit. And then it was on Queens Boulevard, and we had a massive smoke explosion. How we didn't lose somebody, I don't know. But I do remember just reverting to the basics. The incident commander that I came in behind, he was almost like in a bit of a state of a shock. And I was like, what's the first thing I need to do? I need more resources right away. I just transmit a fourth alarm. Get me more help right away. Let's account for everybody. Roll call. And this place, we did a lot of other tactics beyond that, but I couldn't try to do everything at once. So that was stressful, but I had to prioritize it, break it down quick. What are the first things I need to do to ensure that my membership is safe? And then we can worry about everything else.
Thank you.
That's be my approach.
Thank you. Dennis, follow up?
Sure. I think Chief has knocked it out of the park. Please, let's start off with training, and then, of course, more training. The Command Training Center Blue Card process is absolutely, again, one of the gold standards. And the way they describe handling incidents, where you do 10 house fires, 10 apartment fires, 10 building fires, 10 big box fires, is sets and reps. And they equate that to fitness, as in sets and reps with barbells or weights or whatever your workout regimen is. So I would say that becomes a absolute critical part. I think something else worth mentioning, and again, it goes back to aviation, is after action report. If you were to see one of the clips that Sully Sullenberger made, the captain, of course, of the Miracle on the Hudson, the real captain, he talks about the real learning goes on after the flight and in the briefing room. And I get it. Now, he was a lieutenant in the United States Air Force long before he became a U.S. Air pilot. But take advantage of what we can learn in the after action report. I think that's critical. And then I hope there's always a tiered system. In other words, maybe the acting battalion is young. Maybe the safety officer is a little bit older, and talking about years on the job. Maybe the deputy is, again, a little bit more saged. and then whoever else shows up above them. So I've kind of developed, for what it's worth, four personal levels of how I intervene to make sure that the operation goes smooth. And I became a fire chief in 1995. So I'm hoping, again, that nobody's doing any counting, because I am an old son of a gun. But the first thing I like to do, and boy, the DC people, I'd finished a career there and I got to come back years later. They thought I was going to run for mayor, because the first thing I like to do is I like to be the cheerleader. Man, I cannot believe Engine 11, you knocked that fire down. Wow, Truck 6, I can't believe that roof rescue that you made. Rescue 1, you took care of the basement. Gotta love you boys. And I'd shake every single person's hand that I could. So that's a really good day at a fire where I hope I'm relieving their stress, but I assure you, I'm not stressed at all. 2 times as a fire chief, and only 2 times, the next level for me becomes a team player. I got to probably one of the largest fires in modern history in Washington, D.C. We had a 5-alarm working in an apartment fire, and you're saying 5-alarm? Well, behind it was a church that went to an 8-alarm fire. The fire had spread. Not good for us, not great tactics, and I could go into that. But it was a horrendous day. We brought in resources from Maryland as well as Virginia. When I got there, the number 2 chief, who was incredible, he just an amazing man. I'd not be able to say enough about Chief Larry Schultz. But I said, Chief, if we don't get a couple of engines and a ladder truck in this alley, we're going to lose his second apartment, which is just as big as the one on fire project. And he looked at me and he said, well, I'll tell you something. He says, I'm going to go clear these Maydays. I was on the dispatch channel. He was on the operations channel. I switched over when I got there. I didn't hear him. And he said, as soon as I get that done, and I said, I tell you what, I'll take care of this. So we began putting hose lines in place to protect one building. I wish we would have had the foresight to take care of that church, but we didn't. But team player. The next one, I'm going to use Tom Aurnhammer as my example, but be a hot coach. That is not Tommy Aurnhammer in a Speedo. That is not a hot coach. As we know, a coach is a leader, a coach is a teacher, a coach is a person that gets you through the moment, if you will. And hot represents the fact that that process is happening while the incident is going on. Paul Shorter was my hot coach. He wanted to see me be more successful than I was prepared that day. And again, being a battalion chief for 8 years, I was ready to go out on the GD street, let me tell you. He could have done so many other things, but in fact, he lifted me up, helped me through the problem. And I'm going to tell you, who do you think the best search and rescue guy was to get an all clear in that fire department for about the next 3 or 4 years? That was something I'll never forget if I live to be 100. And then finally, and I've done this twice, and that is simply things are going to hell in a handbasket. I hope FAA or FCC or whoever it is doesn't cut off our FCC, doesn't cut off our program for me saying hell in a handbasket. But that's the time you got to take over. Now, I'm very proud of this fact. The 2 times that I've taken over, just like being a team member running a hose crew, if you will, as a white coat fire chief, it was at request. The first time I pulled up, it was a captain acting battalion chief, and he looked at me and he stuttered and he stuttered and just couldn't get the words out like I did a second ago. And he said, will you take this? Of course I'm going to take it. Just, what do you want me to do? I said, you put a nail in your shoe and let's go through this together. So again, and I don't think it's unusual for a senior person not to show up and have a lot of stress. For me, I hope we don't show this to the citizenry, but it's a great day at work when we go to a job. Yes, I'm going to get every bit of enjoyment out of it because I know I'm a lot closer to retirement than I'm a lot closer to getting started. So the takeover piece was the last thing I wanted to do. And I wanted this young man to be able to be a much better and to build some confidence. And we talked through every single decision we made. And all of a sudden it's like, is it that easy? Well, no, it's not that easy. There's still a lot of learning to be done. Train, checklist, all the stuff we've talked about, command training center, et cetera. But he really valued that. And I think became a much better person for it. So that would be my advice, is to train, be ready, be prepared. Don't ever forget to attend an after action report. I can tell you, at least until I made captain, after action reports were painful. I felt like it was always a stick in the eye. Damn it, we put that fire out the best we could. Nowadays, I look at it as a great opportunity. And again, for me, it's cheerleader, team player, coach, and then last resort is I got to take over.
Great, thank you. Tommy, you got a follow-up question for the Chiefs?
Yeah, and I want to kind of focus this on Dennis as, our hour is starting to wind down. But when you were doing the research for the choosing the command book, did you run into any other agencies or groups who were using CRM, and what are they seeing as the advantage?
Of course, it's wholly owned by U.S. Commercial Aviation. And again, I love Gary Brees, but I promise, and I could probably name a few of their players who put it together. Not that that's the question. From there, other elements that have air assets, the military primarily, began to pick it up. And they saw some reductions that were ridiculous. The likelihood of a plane crash up until crew resource management, 80% of the time it was likely human error, a failure on the inputs that a person put into the plane. The plane performed very well, just like Captain Mick Broom back in 1978. From there, especially with Dr. Duwalde, and I'm sure he just is just saying, no, you pronounced it wrong. But I'm sorry, I just can't even get his first name either. Antwol, Andrare, or something to that effect. Then medicine picked it up. Interesting, when you look into medicine, they have a relatively low failure rate. In fact, in some of the in some of the research, operations fail at about 1 to 1.5%. That's pretty doggone good. If you can step onto a baseball field, Chief, are you a Yankees fan or a Mets fan?
Oh, Yankees fan.
Of course. 27 World Series and still going strong. If you were to step on a baseball field and could bat 998.5, there wouldn't be enough money in all of New York to pay you. So it's incredible. Now, if you're one of that 1.5%, that's horrible. And some of the mistakes that have been made are egregious. So the person leaves the operating room with an amputation of the wrong limb. Again, very low percentage. However, you get the idea. So for the most part, medicine has picked that up and began to run with it and run with it pretty significantly. And what I find is it's a little bit of work on the front end. It's a lot of preparation to get it exactly right. But agencies that have a lot to lose, I think a plane crash starts at about a $4 billion marker, plus what's called the good name and character. You're probably not going to ride on the airline that had a crash last week. So again, there are many support agencies. I think it's beyond time, so much so I was lucky enough, and Fire Engineering was wonderful to produce my book. They're the publisher of it. I've been around the country giving classes on the topic. I got a couple coming up here recently. EMS has taken advantage of it. The idea is make the best decision the first time and every time. That's what crew resource management is about. And it uses a process. I know we're almost done, but it uses a process of challenge and confirm, checks and balances, if you want me to make it sound softer. But for instance, the flying pilot happens to be the first officer, and he calls out that he's going to set the flaps at 30. If the pilot, the senior guy, doesn't respond back, flaps at 30, they have to resolve that. They have to fix that. So every single major decision that's made is vocalized between those two. And when you sit back and push away and watch what they do in those airplanes, you have to start thinking about how can I adopt that to making the best decision. And I haven't been to many fireground decision-making classes ever. I've been to a lot of decision-making training, but to be able to put it into our environment, and again, it would be wonderful if you could do it the way of providing the classical example of making a decision that takes a couple of weeks or days. Of course, we don't have that time, but it's going to be the naturalistic decision-making process with no discretionary time.
Tom, Chief Tom, I had a question for you, and I'm not familiar with what you guys are doing for command officer level training at the city. Did you have anything set up at the Rock to do that kind of simulation-based training?
Yeah, I think one of the things, we had next level command level training all the way up. So, lieutenant, first line supervisor, captain, battalion chief. And then somebody said, you know what, why don't we develop one for deputy chief, which is the next rank before you go to a staff chief. So they developed a great course, and it covers a lot of area. But one of the things they do is to put you through what Dennis had mentioned was that one of those, very realistic, overwhelming type of scenarios. And what they use is an exact scenario that happened. So I'll tell you, the scenario I had was a natural gas explosion right next to the Metro North train tracks. So it had fire, it had collapse, it had critical infrastructure, way more that I could handle. And I took so much away from that. And the folks that set that up, that functional exercise, they do such a wonderful job to prepare you for that, as well as, hitting on a lot of other things that you have to handle. Even things, I remember, there was a whole session on, what our role now is in, say, fire prevention type matters and things like that, personnel, human resources, all that. But it's really a big help. I'd like to see us develop one for the next level up. I think that would be even more helpful. So, so that's where we're kind of going with that. So, and I love hearing about the crew resource management. I'm not, anywhere near as knowledgeable about it as Dennis is, but I liken it as to everybody in the fireground has a say. Even our youngest firefighters, you're on the roof, you see something, transmit that, get it on the air. It doesn't matter. You are part of the team. So I think that's part of it. So
great. All right, so we're kind of winding down our hour here, so I think we need to do some other business like we normally do on the show. So I think let's start with Tom. Do you have a role for this month?
Yes.
Yeah. So Tommy always reads a roll of our line of duties nationwide that occurred since the last time we were on the air. So Tom, why don't you do that role for us now?
The last time we were on the air was July 18th. And since then, there's been 11 line of duty deaths. Jairus Hodge from Port St. Lucie, Florida on July 22nd, passed from an unknown medical. Nicholas Van Dam from Murdo, South Dakota on July 26th, died from injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident. Raymond Morrow from Plainville, Connecticut on July 27th, passed away from surgery from a trauma injury. Ed Margacht from Bristol, Pennsylvania on August 15th, again a traumatic injury. Christopher Brown from Norwood, New Hampshire on August 19th, passed from an unknown medical. Rubin Romero from Portland, Oregon on August 24th, heart attack at a wildland fire. Brian Hatt from Raywick, Kentucky on August 25th, died from injuries at a motor vehicle accident. Douglas Thompson, Marietta, Ohio on September 5th, passed from a heart attack after a training exercise. Lucas Gelshausen from Celestine, Indiana on September 7th, a motor vehicle accident. Preston Fatt from Tucker, Georgia on September 8th, passed away from an unknown medical during a fire attack. And Hank Hester from Grand Canyon, Arizona on September 8th, succumbed to a heart attack at a wildland scene. Again, we ask that you keep the family of the fallen in your thoughts and prayers and heed the lessons learned that they have left behind for us.
Thank you, Tommy. One of the things I wanted to share having to do with the theme, I met a guy named Jim Murtaugh in 1974. He was my first professor at John Jay College. And Jim went through the New York Fire Department and retired in 2000 as a deputy assistant chief. And I'm still in touch with him. He became my lifelong mentor. And we're still in touch. Jimmy's, I think, 86. He's living in Florida. And basically, before he moved to Florida a few years ago, he lived in Rockland County. So we would get the disciples together, the Jim Murtaugh disciples. Who are they? Jack Murphy, myself, Glenn Corbett, Charlie Jennings. We'd have breakfast with Jimmy like quarterly, in a diner somewhere in Rockland. So we were talking about command and decision making one day at the breakfast table. And he sent me a picture of a piece of cardboard that he had written things on. And he said, of course, over the years, it would get ruined. So he kept doing it. It was like on, those green press folders. He would cut them out. And I took it and I made it, I typed it. And he kept this in his pocket from when he was a lieutenant. Where's the fire? Where is it going? Where are the people? Where are they going? Where's the smoke? Where's the smoke going? What are we doing? Will it work? If not, then what? And then on the back, he used the decide model. Okay. Detect, estimate. Yeah. And he said, and he rewrote this thing over and over again on a piece of cardboard and kept it in his shirt pocket every time he went to work. And he's got cards too. And he said, I get to a job, I'd whip it out, and I start asking those questions to myself and the people around me. So I've done a couple of classes locally in the last couple of years. I typed this up. It has Jimmy's name on the bottom. He gets the credit for it. And I give these out at these little training things. So it was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Let's go to
That's fantastic.
I keep pocket cards, and the 3 pocket cards that I give away, and I make sure the department that I'm working in has them, refers to Mayday, understanding lunar, the ability to do a 6-point brief initial report, and then the 6 questions of firefighter accountability. They go on in the pocket of the shirt, right next to my accountability tag.
Why not? The answer is why not, right? So we do something also on our show. We do the book club. So I got 3 here that I read in the last couple of months. This is called Trial by Fire. And this is it's called A 15-Year Search for the Truth. This is the Station nightclub in Rhode Island. And they can do a lot more digging, and they talk about the legal aspects of the fire and what happens. It's called Trial by Fire. The next one I read, and I know Chief Currao will get a kick out of this, something on Grenfell, Tom, But this one was written by 2 retired 3-star command officers out of the London Fire Brigade about the Grenfell Tower fire. And on a high-level, intelligent level, these guys did a phenomenal job about everything leading up to the fire, the operation, and then what followed after that. So pretty cool. And if you see the sub thing on there, it says benign neglect and the road to avoidable tragedy. They define what benign neglect is and how the government created that benign. This one I finished the other day. So I'm always looking for something. So this is called Catastrophe and Systemic Change. And it says, learning from Grenfell and other disasters. And this gal, Gil Kernick, it's a woman. She is a 35-year safety professional in high-hazard industry, drilling platforms, refineries, and all that. She lived in the Grenfell Tower up until 2014. So when this fire hit, it caught her attention, and her being a safety professional, she started to dig. But the crux of the book is about why we don't learn from catastrophes, why we can't get past, as Tommy A knows, I got a book in the fire engineering now on 70 fires where more than 20 people died since 1800. Okay, 12,000 people die in this book, and it's here and abroad. Okay, and some of the fires are exactly the same. Okay, I got 7 public assembly fires in there, exactly the same. Interior combustible finishes. They lit off fireworks or pyrotechnics, and you know where all of that took place, right? So, but she talks about why we don't learn from catastrophe. This is one of the most interesting pieces of literature I've read in a long time. She cites Grenfell, but she also cites the Piper Alpha platform fire. She cites the Texas refinery explosion. She goes through a bunch of them and comes back to her theories on why we don't learn. And a lot of it points to the fact that government doesn't take the time, the expense, or the responsibility to make those changes after something bad happens. Great piece of writing. It's called Catastrophe Systemic and Systemic Change. Her name is Gil Kernick, Kernick. Tommy, you got any books?
I got one.
Hit it.
And this one kind of combines my my love of fire service history and one of my favorite parts of America, Emmitsburg, Maryland. I have had the honor to spend a lot of time at the academy, and you'll recognize this, Ron, because it's written by our friend Chip Jewell, and it's history of the fire companies of Frederick County. And just a little bit of history, my love of being a fire buff, all kind of comes together, and Chip had done a wonderful job of putting together the history of Frederick County Fire.
Cool. Yeah, Chip was responsible for creating that fire museum right by the National Fire Academy, right on South Seaton Avenue over there. That was his doing and all that. So he worked with us many years at the memorial. He was our comms coordinator, and just a really good guy. So to wrap up this entire session, and we'll say our thank yous in a moment. Chiefs, we have a little something special. We call it the hot seat questions. And we're going to wrap up. They go off rapidly. Tommy Aurnhammer is going to start with Chief Rubin, and then Tom Currao, I'm going to ask you the same series of questions. So go ahead. Rubin, you can't think about it. You just got to give us an answer as soon as you hear it. This is the lightning round right here. Go ahead, Tom.
What's your favorite color?
Red.
What's your favorite fire truck color?
Red.
What's your favorite late night snack?
Cheese crackers.
What's your favorite firehouse meal?
Meatloaf.
Dude. What's your favorite chain restaurant?
Olive Garden.
Oh, no. I'll say it.
It's a chain. I ate there last night.
What's your favorite type of place or style of food to eat, either in the restaurant or takeout?
Italian or Mexican?
What's your favorite sports team?
Oh, that's easy. I've got Washington Capitals, Washington Nationals, and the Washington Redskins, and they're tattooed on my arm.
What's your favorite comfort food?
Would bourbon be okay? Buffalo Trace.
Oh, it's your food.
How about your favorite animal?
Dog.
Engine or truck?
Oh, engine. I got the engine on the other tattoo.
So, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give the 20-year-old version of Dennis Rubin?
Calm down. Slow down.
I like it. All right, Chief Currao, you ready?
I'm ready,
Favorite
sir.
color?
Blue.
Favorite fire truck color?
Definitely
Favorite
red.
late night snack?
Favorite late night snack? Yeah, I'm a big sweet tooth. I have to say, like cookies.
Yeah, I had you an ice cream guy, but that's all right. Favorite firehouse meal?
I'm gonna go with Dennis. I was a big fan, and I love to make meatloaf and twice baked potatoes.
Sounds good. Favorite chain restaurant?
I would say Outback.
All right. Favorite type of place or style of food to go out and eat?
Yeah, I like a home cooking type of thing. So like a nice Italian restaurant or something like that. I think basic kind of thing.
Favorite sports team?
So this is going to sound weird, but my in-laws are from the Midwest, so my favorite football team is actually the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay, so you did that in honor of your in-laws. That's very noble. Very noble.
I did.
At least he calls them in-laws. I call mine the outlaws, so that's okay. Favorite comfort food? What makes you happy? Other than cookies, you can't say
my favorite comfort
you can't
food?
say cookies.
Yeah, no. You know what? I'm gonna say like a nice Italian meal. Like I love to make baked ziti.
Okay.
You know, for some reason that's a nice, middle of winter kind of stuff.
What's your favorite animal?
Definitely dog.
Engine
yeah.
or truck, Tom? Engine or truck?
Yeah, engine. Absolutely.
All right. So
tip of the spear.
Okay. So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old Tom Currao? Knowing what you know now, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I would say, definitely enjoy every single moment. We are, I think, a lot of times looking always for the next thing or the next challenge or whatever. And even from your first day, like, and you're a new recruit or a probie, just enjoy that, because you'll never be a probie again. It's your one time, right? So, and just embrace every moment you have in the fire service.
Great. I was interviewed on a podcast recently, and the kid asked me the question. I got this from my buddy Mike Colon. He does a show called Mic'd Up in New Haven out of Connecticut. And he asked me the same question, and I always give him credit for this thing because I thought it's pretty cool to do with our guests. And he said, "What would you tell a 20-year-old Ron Kanterman?" I said, "I'd look that kid in the eye and say, you better lose weight, fat bastard, because you're going to have to do some stuff going down the line, I was a 300-pound kid at one time, so it was like, you better lose weight, so you can function. So we had a great time. So with all of that, Chiefs, I can't thank you enough. This was a great show. We're going to advertise on social media between now. It should go up on a coming Monday night. Our night is usually Monday night on a fire engineering, and they have their YouTube. It'll be on the YouTube channel. Well, we can't thank you enough for your experience, your wisdom, everything you brought to the show tonight, and we appreciate your time and all your effort to make this happen. So thank you very much. Thank you.
What an honor. Thank you.
Yes.
Great.
So, Tom and Dennis, pleasure to meet you.
Good to meet you, Chief.
So with that, we're going to say farewell from the Backstep. You guys be careful. Wear your seatbelt, wear your mask, and hug your family at night before you go to bed or before you go to work or before you go out the door as a volunteer. Make sure they know you love them and all that stuff. So that's important. We'll see you again on the Backstep. Take care, everybody.
Prepare, respond, survive. When seconds count, train with the best. FireFacilities, custom steel towers built for real-world fire training. Be ready, be resilient.